My mom drove me home from practice every single afternoon for 2 years, and never once noticed that I wore the same uniform covered in fading bruises. Coach Brennan had a target, and it was me, not the other girls who laughed and drank water between drills, but the goalie who didn't fit his perfect idea of a champion team. When I was 14, Zoe asked in the locker room why my jersey had dark stains on it, and before I could answer, I felt his hand grip my shoulder as he stood in the doorway saying, "She fell during drills, happens when you lose focus." Right, Mia? From the parking lot, my mom honked the horn impatiently, and that became his opportunity, because my mother's nursing shifts meant the field belonged to him. By 15, every practice felt like a punishment carved into routine. I stayed in goal through endless shots while the others ran laps. He'd count each save out loud with disappointment. 23 today, 3 less than yesterday. Extra conditioning after they leave. I tried to explain about homework, but he silenced me with the whistle, and the others left while my gear stayed locked in his office. "Coach, please, my mom's waiting." He'd tap his watch and say, "She can wait 5 minutes unless you want her to know you're not serious about the game." So I smiled when she arrived, pretending I was fine. Sometimes I hinted that my bruises wouldn't heal, but she thought it was just rough training. By winter, my uniform looked permanently stained and my ribs ached from constant impact. Once, when I limped between classes, he made me stay an extra hour firing shots at my head until I couldn't see straight. When my mom texted she'd be late, he told me to wash my uniform so it looked clean, and when she pulled up, he smiled, saying, "Good, you're ready to go." I stopped fighting back after that. One morning, I looked in the mirror and saw what he'd been telling me for months. Too weak, too slow, too soft. I told him before practice, "You're right, I don't belong here." And for the first time, he hesitated, saying, "Maybe you just need work on reflexes," but I said no. "You were right, coach. We both knew quitting outright would raise questions, but getting hurt badly enough in a game would look like an accident." During the championship match that spring, I stood in goal like I was waiting for execution. The opposing striker lined up for a penalty shot, and I remembered his words, "Stay centered. Don't dive, prove you can take it." The ball came straight for my face and I didn't move. Everything went white, then black, and I heard my mom's voice screaming my name from the stands. She ran to the field as coach pretended concern, saying she froze. "Maybe a concussion." I could barely speak but managed, "You told me not to move." "You said real goalies take the hit." My mom's face changed completely as she looked between us. The last thing I heard before losing consciousness was Zoe's voice, steady and shaking, saying coach keeps her after practice alone for years, making her block shots until she collapses. I woke up in the hospital to the sound of machines and my mom crying. The doctor said fractured cheekbones, severe bruising consistent with repeated impact. If it had been harder, you'd be blind. And somewhere down the hall, coach was telling administrators that I wanted attention and had been reckless. But this time, I knew he'd gone too far, and I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. When I woke again the next morning, the pain had settled deep in my bones, and the swelling made my face feel like it belonged to someone else. Doctors came and went, speaking in careful tones about old fractures that had healed wrong, and injuries that couldn't be explained by normal training. They took x-rays showing damage layered over months of impact. Meanwhile, the school sent an investigator named Patricia from the district office who arrived with a clipboard and a tight smile, followed by coach pretending to be heartbroken. He held my hand, saying he'd always worried I pushed myself too hard and interrupted whenever I tried to tell her about staying late for punishment drills. My words slurred from medication while he filled the silence with stories about my ambition. Patricia wrote everything, but her eyes looked uncertain. Later that day, they told me practice was suspended while both sides were being investigated, and guilt hit me like a wave, thinking my teammates were paying the price for what I hadn't been brave enough to stop. 3 days passed in a blur until I finally told my nurse everything. How he'd lock my gear bag so I couldn't leave, how he'd shoot balls until my nose bled and call it training. She listened quietly and promised to pass it to social work. The next morning, a pediatric specialist, Dr. Halstead, examined me, taking photos of bruises and noting the layers of trauma visible in my ribs, hands, and shoulders. Anger flickered behind his calm expression as he ordered imaging to track how long it had been happening. On the 4th day, Zoe came with her mom and a notebook she'd been keeping for a year, documenting dates, times, and his comments about me being too soft. She'd written every moment he'd made me stay late or mocked my pain. Tears ran down her face when she saw the bandages, and she promised to help expose him. She'd already sent copies to Patricia and a lawyer her parents knew. 2 days later, Coach appeared at the hospital with flowers and a fake smile, but security stopped him at the door when he tried to force his way in. That same afternoon, a lawyer named Leonard Wu met with us, explaining the difference between civil and criminal cases and how difficult it would be to prove intent, but he believed the evidence could show deliberate harm. A week later, Patricia returned asking more questions that felt like accusations. Wondering if I misunderstood his methods or exaggerated my pain, she mentioned his spotless record and glowing parent testimonials. I felt my chance at justice slipping away until Zoe came back again, bringing 3 more teammates willing to testify. Each described what they'd seen, how he screamed when I cried or laughed when the ball hit my face, how he told everyone to ignore my complaints. Together, their words built a picture too clear to deny. My mom finally admitted she'd noticed stains and limps for months but believed his excuses. Reading through her old texts with him, we realized he'd been gaslighting her as well, responding to every concern with charm and medical jargon. On my 8th day, they started physical therapy to test facial nerves, and I cried from pain as I tried to move muscles that barely responded. Leonard kept digging, requesting Coach's personnel file and previous complaints. The district refused to cooperate, citing privacy, which only made him more certain we had a strong case. A few days later, Maya found old social media posts from Coach boasting that pain was weakness leaving the body, and bragging about breaking down athletes to rebuild them stronger. Leonard said those words proved intent, not negligence. Patricia brought new documents showing practice officially ended at 5, while gym logs recorded him staying until 7 with one student, me. Even she looked shaken when she saw the dates. By the time I was discharged home, the case had grown too big to hide. But I still felt trapped between healing and rage, knowing the system that failed to protect me might protect him too. I promised myself I wouldn't let that happen again. After I was sent home, the district arranged tutoring because they said I couldn't return until the investigation was complete. I felt isolated and restless watching from my window as life went on without me. Meanwhile, Coach started posting online about false accusations and weak modern athletes turning people against him. His words made me sick. But Leonard said every post helped our case by showing his arrogance. Days later, Dr. Halstead returned with the full medical report confirming months of systematic abuse. Multiple healed fractures, concussions, and tissue damage impossible to get from normal training. Leonard began gathering security footage showing how I never left until long after my mom arrived, proving I'd been kept alone. Patricia's team searched the gym and found a notebook hidden in Coach's office full of notes about my reactions to pain and how far he could push before I broke. Reading that made my hands shake. Within hours, Coach's lawyer went on TV painting him as a misunderstood mentor. Seeing that made my stomach twist. But Leonard reminded me we were winning because innocent men didn't need to lie publicly. The district tried to protect itself, claiming they had no knowledge of extra sessions until Leonard found nurse records showing I'd visited 31 times for injuries that grew worse over 18 months. The evidence lined up perfectly with the practice logs and medical findings. Patricia finally admitted the school had failed to act on clear warning signs. Soon, the Athletic Association suspended his coaching license pending charges. It wasn't prison, but it meant he couldn't reach new victims. Months later, we entered settlement talks. The judge forced the district to pay medical costs, implement new safety policies, and ban him permanently. I thought justice would feel like relief, but it mostly felt like exhaustion. My recovery became physical and emotional therapy. Each small motion of my face a reminder of what he'd taken. My teammates visited and hung a banner saying, "We see you now." For the first time in years, I felt believed. I decided not to play soccer again, choosing instead to focus on advocacy and writing about accountability. My story reached parents and schools who wanted to prevent what happened to me. I spoke at youth safety events using my scars as evidence that silence protects abusers, not victims. The criminal case moved slowly, but eventually Coach was charged with assault and child endangerment. He pled not guilty, claiming old-fashioned methods. I spent the summer preparing to testify, learning to stay calm under questioning. When the hearing began, I told the court about those extra hours alone in goal, about the pain and the fear. My voice didn't shake this time. The doctor presented imaging that proved deliberate trauma, and my teammates read from journals that matched every word. Coach's fake calm cracked as evidence piled up, and the judge ruled there was enough for trial. His lawyer begged for a plea deal, and he finally admitted guilt to avoid prison. When it was my turn for a victim statement, I spoke about what he stole. My confidence, my love for the game, and the belief that adults always protect kids. My mom and friends gave their statements too, and by the end, the courtroom was silent. The judge banned him from coaching forever and ordered community service. People online argued about whether it was justice or overreaction, but I stopped caring. I had survived something meant to destroy me, and that was victory enough. Months after sentencing, I kept working through therapy, learning that healing wasn't about forgetting, but reclaiming what had been taken. My new therapist helped me process memories using slow, steady techniques, until I could talk about them without breaking. One day I realized I'd told the whole story without crying, and felt something release inside me like air leaving a wound. I began volunteering with a youth safety group, teaching others how to recognize manipulation and emotional abuse in sports. It gave me a reason to get out of bed and turned my anger into something useful. Other survivors reached out sharing their stories, and together we built a small network of people who refused to stay quiet. My scars faded slightly, though they remained visible, and I learned to wear them like proof that I had endured and grown stronger. My mom joined a support group for parents and stopped blaming herself. We rebuilt our relationship slowly through honesty and time. She changed jobs to be home more, and we started sharing real conversations instead of quick exchanges between shifts. I didn't return to soccer because I no longer needed to. I found purpose writing about reform and accountability, publishing articles about how schools could protect students from abusive authority. The work opened doors to conferences and panels where I spoke not as a victim, but as an advocate for change. A year later, I applied to universities and realized my essay didn't mention Coach at all. Because he no longer defined me, I was accepted to a college with a strong sports policy program, where I could study the systems that had failed me and learn to rebuild them better. When Mom helped me move into my dorm, she said she was proud. Not despite what happened, but because of what I had done with it. I hung a photo of my old team on the wall to honor the friends who spoke up when it mattered. Their courage reminded me that truth always finds light. Standing there, I knew I had survived something meant to crush me, and instead it had shaped me into someone unbreakable. Coach had tried to silence me, but his cruelty became the foundation of my strength. I was no longer the broken goalie left alone in the net. I was the girl who refused to stay small, who turned pain into purpose and learned that survival is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new one.